Today, I'm going to be discussing the recent West Virginia public adjuster fee cap legislation with Cole Kline and Anthony DiUlio. Okay, welcome, Tony and Cole. If you wouldn't mind, take a few seconds or a couple of minutes and let's Cole start with you. Let's talk about you and your background and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey Brad. Thanks for asking us to be on here. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm president of the American Association of Public Insurance Adjusters. I'll talk a little bit about who we are and what we do and our members and the benefit they get. Then I'm also I run a public adjusting firm or a national firm that we operate in 27, 28 different states. And we focus on primarily large loss insurance claims. But APIA, the American Association of Public Insurance Adjusters, we're a non-for-profit a trades association. We have a number of public adjusting members all over the country, and we're just growing really quickly. And so that's a little bit about us. We focus on legislative efforts across the country. We'll get into some of these, but different states like Illinois, Kentucky, a few national model acts, West Virginia, which we'll talk a little bit about. So really cool things that we're working on for public adjusters and trying to advocate for not just our industry, but for policyholders that our industry serves. And then my firm, Hope Public Adjusters, talk a little bit about what public adjusters do. We are advocates for policyholders. We help homeowners and building owners through the claims process from number of situations. Maybe the insurance company has undervalued the loss. They're not paying enough and the contractor can't get the work done, or it's just a complex process. The insured has a fire and they don't know what to do with their structure, coordinating contractors, the personal property, all the vendors involved with that, inventorying unsalvageable items, or loss of use, temporary housing, and business interruption coverages. So we assess and process and really estimate to negotiate with the insurance company for a reasonable settlement that a full and fair insurance claim settlement. And so that's what public adjusters do. With APIA, we have members that assist on all types of losses, from multi-million-dollar losses to your everyday or an average claim below $25,000. And so that's what we're made up of. And I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more.
Good. Tony, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks so much. My name's Tony DiUlio. I'm a litigation attorney based out of Philadelphia that works nationally, helping on these claims when things go south. So, a lot of times public adjusters are able to get a claim resolved, everything goes smoothly. But when they don't go smoothly and carriers, put up a wall and say, we're not paying any more money or denying a claim, I step in to get the insurance companies to pay what they're supposed to. I also work as an advisor to APIA. On the national scale, we really try to focus on adjusters, the everyday adjusters, as much as the large loss guys. We as an organization realize that adjusters help property owners on a day-to-day basis, and we don't want to leave anybody out. So we really take a voice of the average public adjuster and make sure that our industry is being protected when we have legislation that's moving forward that affects those people just as much as the big ones. So we really try to, for a relatively low cost, help our members out across the country, protecting them.
Good. All right. So, Cole, I want to drill down a little bit more on public adjusting. Are public adjusters licensed in every state, or do you have to be licensed?
In most states, it's a good question. I'm aware of a few states that don't require a license. Wisconsin requires a certificate, and Alaska, I don't think it has any legislation on public adjusters, so a license, isn't required there. Some states don't allow public adjusters, Alabama being one of them. And so in most states where public adjusters operate, they hold a certificate of authority, a public adjuster's license to operate in that state. That's a good question.
Okay. So some states do have licensing and other states just ask for a certificate.
Majority of states
Yeah.
have licensing. Yep.
Okay. And I assume with that license, there's education requirements, continuing education requirements to maintain the license?
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhat can be difficult to find resources to to study for exams, but in order to get a license, in most states that I'm aware of, there's a test that you pass in order to receive that license.
Sure. Okay. And some of the professional services that a public adjuster would provide is probably initial assessment of the claim. You're going to take a look at the documents and learn more about the claim, right? Could you talk about that a little bit, what that process looks like to even find out if it's viable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Yes. So a lot of times just from assessing a loss, and public adjusters can actually help carriers in this a lot of the time, where we assess a loss and really can stop a claim from being filed that may otherwise have been filed if it's illegitimate. And so there's a lot of the pre-claim legwork, is kind of what we refer to it as, but pulling storm verification reports, assessing the loss, verifying the size of hailstone impact, referring to the weather verification report, figuring out when the damage actually occurred, that kind of thing. So reviewing that documentation, assisting in the preparation of the claim, putting together estimates of the loss consistent with the damage that's relative to the date of loss, and then presenting that claim to the insurance company, sometimes following up quite a bit with carriers to ensure that the burden of proof has been met and to start the negotiation process.
So on the initial assessment, I would think that probably could take anywhere from a couple of days to possibly a couple of weeks to do a proper assessment once you look at all the documents and decide what's happening. I assume you also have to gather documents and documentation and then go out and do an inspection, right? Could you touch on that a little bit about what kind of documents you're looking for from the policyholder and the insurance carrier, right? And then what does the inspection look like?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Lots of good questions. So the documentation that we typically look for at the beginning of the claim would be the policy. We want to review the policy for coverages, limitations, exclusions, endorsements, potential co-insurance penalties, increased deductibles for wind or hail, just provisions of the policy. We're also looking to determine if prior claims have been filed before our involvement. Have there been renovations to the building? We want to know that before the claim was filed. And have they had prior issues, or do they have maintenance records, that kind of thing. So some of the documentation that we're reviewing, as well as ones you may assume, like contractor estimates, photos, kind of those kind of things. And then our inspection process. So we're trying to get the documentation prior to our inspection of the loss. That way we have our bearings, if you will. And then an inspection of the property, depending on the extent of damage, type of building. Some commercial losses can be a lot more complex than some, maybe smaller losses, and can sometimes require engineers for, structural assessment. Sometimes we're core sampling roof systems for the to figure out what the substrate of the roof system is made of, how thick is it, wet. So it can be a process. It can take some time, whether we're bringing in industrial hygienists to get reports and testing. There's a lot of kind of technical approach that public adjusters can take to the claims process to make sure that, like I said, we're meeting that burden of proof standard and presenting the claim accurately.
So it sounds like on complex claims, it could take several weeks, even months, but maybe possibly to put all of this together. And on a smaller claim, maybe not as much, but listening to what you're saying brings up the question, when an insurance adjuster gets the claim, makes the appointment, and comes out on site, have they gone through that whole process of a proper assessment, gathering all the documents, all of it before they actually get out and see the property?
Maybe to some extent, I would assume, potentially reviewing the policy or prior claim history. But the burden of proof or proving the loss falls on the insured party. So adjuster from the insurance company is charged to try to find coverage under the terms of the policy, but they're not there to find damage. They're not walking around the house saying, oh, it's up to the insured's party, the public adjuster, or maybe a public adjuster isn't involved in just their contractor, but to present the claim to the insurance company. And so that's where we come in. And that's a big misconception with policyholders. They believe they'll file a claim, the adjuster, and they'll come out and inspect, but they're not doing the detailed inspection that is a lot of the time not just necessary, but required in order to present the claim.
So if a policyholder doesn't understand that, there could be a disconnect between the policyholder and their insurance adjuster. They aren't realizing that they have to present the claim or prove the loss, right? So they're leaving it up to that adjuster. So when you put all of your information together, you've done your inspection, now you're going to meet with the adjuster, maybe a couple of times, I don't know. Now you're into the negotiation piece and the settlement piece. So maybe talk about how that process works and what the time frame is to settle the claim.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always get asked, how long is this going to take? And we always say that's the silver-lined question that it's ever changing. So we've as a firm we've settled a $1.8 million loss before in 8 days, and we've settled a $30,000 claim in 9 months.
Right.
It's very different, and a lot of it has to do with the carrier that you're their internal procedures that they have, or the skill level of the adjuster that they're sending out. We're all people. We all start somewhere, and we have found that adjusters with less skill level, that may be a little more green or new to the industry, are typically on lower value claims. There are going to be a lot of mistakes there. And the reason for that is because there's less risk. They have less authority. So they're on lower value claims. And as we get to higher value claims, typically adjusters with more authority or experience are on those claims. Not to say they can't make mistakes. They, all people, and they do. But the negotiation process is typically, at least in my firm's experience, can be a pretty civil, and it's just providing the facts, right? So that's the role of the public adjusters to provide the facts of the claim, and our goal is the same, with the insurance company, to make sure that we've provided all of the facts, and if the insurance company does the right thing, they'll review all the facts and then extend consideration or compensation accordingly.
Okay. So I guess one last question, and once you settle the claim and everything is going well, is that where you exit, or do you actually stay around a little bit longer to make sure the paperwork is in order, that things are going? I mean, tell me when do you exit a claim? When are you done?
That's a good question. We actually have a claim currently that this was a private school that we had worked on, and the roof system was really big, as a really, really large claim. The roof system was damaged by hailstone impact, and the insurance company also extended coverage to replace the deck on the roof system, the metal deck, the roof deck. And because of the size of the roof and the extent of damage, the contractor could only replace 1/4 a year during summer break, right? They had a small window. They couldn't pull off this metal deck while kids are in this building, which extended the loss to be basically it's going to be a 4-year project. Insurance companies on board with that, but for the public adjuster, our involvement extends basically that entire time to help them recover depreciation, after each one of these sections is completed. And then in other cases, more average type losses, such as a fire, sometimes there can be a really extended period of indemnity, where we're following up on depreciation after construction is completed, or to release depreciation or withheld money from the insurance company on personal property, because the insured isn't going to buy their stuff because they don't have anywhere to put it until they move back into the house. So this may be, 2 years or more before we're actually out of the picture.
I see. And I assume that you also have, depending on the size of a PA firm, that you have clerical backup, you have staff, you have support staff that help with these claims, right? I mean, it's just, yeah.
We're a team. So we've got an accounting department. We've got what we call customer success for communication, just keeping people updated, clients updated, their contractors. It's communications, one of the biggest pieces. We also have a contents department, a structure department, an inspections department. So it's an operation. We hold quite a bit of overhead for what we do.
Sure.
And so that's a big piece.
And now we're going to move, kind of segue into Tony. I would assume that part of your team is a very competent and good attorney. I would just think they would have to be on the team, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just
a little bit.
Only the tiniest portion of what we do. No, I've been really lucky. I got into this industry 12 years ago, 13 years ago now. And, I've been able to grow the firm now. We have a team with Mario and myself as the partners. We have 7 other attorneys who work with us who are absolutely fantastic. They get education on this specific industry beyond being fantastic attorneys and litigators and writers. But it is also having the right staff involved. I mean, there are people in my office that aren't the lawyers that we couldn't survive without. And we tell them that as often as we can to remind them of how fantastic they are. But really, when it comes to the face of the firm, it's the lawyers, and they really are amazing.
So do you help the public adjusters with a claim review if they need it, where you actually look at and analyze the policies and documents and so forth?
On a nearly daily basis, Brad. So one of the things that I find to be so important in this industry is helping public adjusters and other people in this industry without asking for something in return. So one of the things that I've started to do a couple of years ago was provide Lunch and Learns, which is an online video once a month that provides free education for public adjusters. We give materials out. If a public adjuster is curious, what should my first inspection really look like? We have a first inspection checklist. You can get it completely for free on our website to just have a nice little, I did this, I did that, I did this. So it goes through, make sure you took your photos, you took your measurements, you got your background, all of that information. And then I tell adjusters in every speech I have ever given in my career, I think, that they can call me anytime with questions. I give my cell phone number, they text me, call me. And, 3 times today, adjusters have reached out and said, hey, what do I do about this situation? What does this policy mean? I really am happy to do it because I don't want a case to have to go to litigation. And I don't think there's a lot of attorneys that are going to tell you that, but it is way better for a property owner if I don't get involved. Because candidly, I have to charge, right? And if they have to pay a lawyer now on top of dealing with their claim and not getting paid and delaying it, I mean, that's not a good result.
Yeah.
So I want to provide as much education as I can to make sure these claims get resolved without ever coming across my desk.
So if they had a question on negotiation or dispute resolution, if they're running into a problem, they could give you a call and you can kind of walk them through it and give them your advice.
Absolutely. So and I'll say it right now, my cell phone, 609-354-8009. If you've got a question about a policy, about a claim, reach out. It doesn't cost a dime. I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to review stuff. Like I said, I do it on a daily basis now, and I like doing that stuff.
With legal research, would that help the public adjuster, about case law, things that they need to know about? I suppose you can help and support in that area as well.
Yeah, so case law is a unique thing, because so often in our world there isn't a clear answer, and it's so wild when we get into these cases and you think, oh, of course this has to have been argued so much that the case law is crystal clear on this issue, and then you do your dive and you realize, oh, it's not clear at all. But it can help really with expectations and game plans moving forward with adjusters, where they say, hey, is there any cases on this? And I can go back and say, well, there are. Here's what happened in the ones that are favorable. So try and do this, make these arguments. You always want to be careful that you're not practicing law, but I tell the adjusters all the time, they can reference a case and their understanding of it. It's not practicing law. They just can't tell insurance companies they're violating the law by not doing it. That's when you start crossing some lines.
So I would think that documentation and compliance is very important for a public adjuster.
I believe that it would be hard for me to figure out something more important than documenting a claim for a public adjuster. It's one of my biggest frustrations, candidly, with some adjusters when I get files from them. I've done more courses on documenting a loss than probably anything else, maybe policy interpretation, but it's incredibly important to properly document a claim so that everything is memorialized in some form or fashion, whether it's a photo, a video, a letter. It's so important. Just by way of one short example, you go to an inspection and you have a conversation and an agreement with an adjuster, and it's all verbal, and you think everybody's on the same page, and then a week later you get a letter saying the claim's denied. And that happens literally every day with public adjusters. All you have to do is send a letter when you just get back to your car. Send a text message for all I care. Whatever it is, put something in writing that says, hey, I'm so glad we could come to an agreement on X, Y, and Z things. You've now memorialized your conversation in writing, and it makes it so much harder for them to come back and change their mind later.
So it really shows that a policyholder who is unfamiliar with the process, really, I don't want to say could be taken advantage of, but if they're unfamiliar with the process, it may not work out as well for them as it could, right? Without some professionals.
Absolutely. And look, the truth is insurance companies are professionals who's working in essence against you. And I know that sounds crazy and it sounds like there's some conspiracy theory with insurance companies, but it's just the reality of the business model for carriers is they make more money if they pay less claims. So if the carrier has a professional on a loss, I highly recommend that a property owner do the same, even for little things. They just don't recognize to say, oh, my house was flooded. And the carrier asks something like, do you know the source of the water? They say, I don't know. Could it have come in from outside, in the ground? They say, I don't know. It could have. And then all of a sudden you get a denial letter saying it's groundwater. Well, no, it actually came in from the broken pipe inside the wall, and it never did come from the ground, but now you've got a denial you've got to overcome. So it's so much of it is just making sure you're presenting it the right way.
So let's kind of move into the public adjuster fee cap. And I'll let either one of you kind of describe what that is, what the situation is, and what's happening in some states and probably multiple states. So whoever wants to start, go ahead and listen and describe what a public adjuster fee cap is.
I can take that. So we as Appia have worked in a number of states this past year or so to overcome proposed fee caps in like I said, a number of states where through legislation they are trying to impose in specific jurisdictions, but impose fee restrictions on public adjusters. So a few examples of those would be a cap on the amount a public adjuster can charge on the total claim, or from date of contract forward, or the states that have imposed fee caps are seem to be all across the board and somewhat differ. But what we've learned more than anything is that what happens in one state is likely to transfer to another state. So oh, sorry, Tony.
No, I want to take it one step back because I want to keep going and have you go, Cole. But one of the things I want to make sure everyone understands that watches this is that public adjusters almost unilaterally across the country work on a contingency fee, that they only get paid in the event that the property owner gets paid. And it's a protection on the property owner, just like with attorneys. If something goes wrong, you don't owe them anything for that work. So that is based off of a percentage of what the claim value is paid out on. These fee caps try to limit that to say you can only get this percentage of return on a claim, which might at first blush sound fantastic until you realize that, oh wait, what happens when there's a $10,000 loss that the insurance company doesn't want to pay for? I can't get professional help because nobody can do it because the fee would be too low. So I just wanted to make sure there was that kind of base understanding. So sorry, Cole, go ahead.
Sure.
Oh yeah, that was great. Yeah, thank you for
That was
adding
good.
to
Thank you.
So we've had an opportunity to work in a number of different states this past year. Illinois being one of those, Kentucky being one. There's now a few national model acts that we're working on or have worked on that are proposing kind of template legislation that they will more or less kind of sell off to these other states. Oklahoma, West Virginia, and then now our main focus that we're kind of focusing on at this time is South Carolina, which has a proposed fee cap of 10%. And so it's an issue. I said that what happens in one state can kind of transcend to others. Kentucky had originally proposed a 2.5% fee cap on the first, I think it was 25,000, and then 10% after that. And we were able to overcome that fee restriction somewhat. We completely got the 2.5% removed. They did end up imposing a fee cap, but a lot higher than the 10% initially proposed. What happened in Kentucky was that that legislation transferred to a national model act through NCOIL. Which has now adopted the legislation that Kentucky went forward with. And we foresee that potentially being proposed to different states. So again, what happens in one state does transcend to the other. So at least for our industry, it's really important to be aware of these issues that are happening in different states, because it'll probably happen in yours, and to assist with them to take action.
So who and why are they pushing for fee caps? I mean, who's behind this? Is it the insurance carriers? Is it contractors? Is it the policyholder? Let's talk about a little about who and why.
So I'll field this one. The push has been from the carrier side and their lobbying groups. So there's a few groups nationally that work with carriers, either mutual carriers or others. And the concept of why this matters so much on a claim, if you don't have a public adjuster, and we've got multiple studies now on this issue, claims don't get paid out properly as often. So we've got a claim that one of our examples was a property that had been paid out $8,000 for damages. A public adjuster gets involved and the claim moves to a little over $80,000. Insurance companies don't just pay claims out of goodwill, they pay for a covered loss. So that loss was always over $80,000. It just needed professional assistance to get there. Here's the problem. If you put a fee cap on an $8,000 claim, a public adjuster cannot get involved. It just doesn't, and make any money, I should say. They're not going to be able to do that in long term, and it allows insurance companies to be unchecked on a mass majority of claims. The average claim in this country is between $14,000 and $15,000. That's it. It's not some monumental number. And 92% of all insurance claims are under $25,000. So when you start figuring that out, you realize these insurance companies can just go unchecked on 92% of all claims across the country if there was this fee cap. And that's just not right? We're put in a situation where we recognize that public adjusters are necessary. We recognize they show and prove additional damages covered by a policy, but then you try to eliminate that factor from a claim. That's the issue.
Okay, so if the average claim is around $8,000, what is there an average that it grows to? Now you mentioned, 14 to, to 25,000. Excuse me. So if you took an $8,000 average without a public adjuster, what do you think it would average? What would be the growth of that claim?
So to be clear, 14 to 15,000 is the average claim. That's the 50% mark in the country.
Okay.
And if we have the studies that show the public adjuster value add is hundreds of percentages higher. So 400% value add to the claim. And carriers come back and try and say stuff like, oh, well, that's because public adjusters are inflating a claim. It couldn't be further from the truth, because carriers only pay for covered damage. It's this wild red herring for carriers to come back and say public adjusters inflating a claim, that's why we're paying more. But we all know they don't just pay a loss without supporting evidence and documentation. So it's not that they're inflating it, it's they're showing what is actually covered under this policy, and the carriers are now being put in a position where they've got no choice but to pay.
Okay, so that's kind of the who and the why. Do you want to add something, Cole, to that?
That it's not about the percentage of increase or on average what a public adjuster adds to the claim, but that the public adjuster has the toolkit to properly present the loss for what is reasonable. And every claim is going to be assessed on its own merit, because every loss is different, every size of home. And so not the percentage of increase, but that the public adjuster has the toolkit to properly present the loss where the consumer needs licensed professional assistance. So
you did an excellent job, both of you did, of explaining the process and what a public adjuster does and the support that an attorney gives. We talked about the who and the why, but let's talk about what happens to the claim. What happens to the policyholder if the public adjuster can't afford to step in and help? What happens?
They're left in the dust. And there's really no other way to put it. So I see claims on a regular basis, and I'm sure Cole does as well, where a carrier comes in and just misses damage. And I don't want to be here saying they're doing it on purpose, whether or not I believe that or not. But the truth is they just miss stuff. They're overworked. They're inspecting 3, 4, 5 claims a day. They just don't have an opportunity to see it all. And then they rely on the property owner to present the claim. And the property owner only sees a water stain on a ceiling and doesn't really understand what that means and where you need to look otherwise. So if they can't get the help, they are left with pennies on the dollar for a claim that should be paid, a property that is damaged that can't be repaired, and that is only going to get worse over time as a result.
And it speaks to my statement about especially on these lower value losses. Typically it's the newer adjusters, and there's a learning curve with construction, adjusting claims, estimating. So a lot of these newer adjusters just ripe into the field. These are the ones that are being sent out to these average size losses. And that's where a lot of the mistakes happen, not because of intention, but because there's a learning curve and we're people,
So let's move into West Virginia. So what happened in West Virginia? Who wants to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'm sure Cole can jump in with some of it as well. So West Virginia had proposed a new amendments to their bill to have some good things. To be perfectly honest, there was some good stuff in the bill as well, but one of the factors was to add in a fee cap for public adjusters. And this legislation, again, for all these reasons we're talking about, was problematic. And it was only in the early stages. They had drafted the bill and it had passed one of the houses. I don't remember if it was the House or the Senate. It passed one and was in the Judiciary Committee for review. And APPIA got word of this, and we stepped in to really educate these legislators, because so often what we find is they just don't really understand what public adjusters do, what the value of them is to the consumers. APPIA's big push is we are here as much for the consumers as we are for the public adjusters, because what's good for a consumer is good for a public adjuster. And when we started to explain this through lobbying efforts, through education, they did the right thing in West Virginia. They stepped up and said, look, this bill's not right. This bill is not in a position to move forward, and it never got put forward for a vote with the Judiciary Committee, and in the bill world, it died. It was left unmoved on. So we were able to stop that from moving forward and continue to protect those consumers of West Virginia.
How long of a process did that take, Tony, to actually work with the legislators and walk them through the process?
Yeah, so it started. I actually remember that I was down in Florida at the Wind Conference when we had our first conference with some of the legislators in West Virginia, and they were really open to it. It was about 2 months of effort going back and forth through multiple calls and Zoom meetings and things like that to get enough people on board and understanding to say, okay, we recognize that there's a problem, and we're gonna stop this before it goes any further.
Interesting. Okay. Cole, do you have anything you'd like to add to West Virginia?
Yeah, the proposed language in West Virginia, we found it a little jolting just with how low the proposed fee restrictions on public adjusters were. A 10% fee cap on non-catastrophic losses and a 5% fee cap on catastrophic losses. Just a really big hit to not only public adjusters, but policyholders that require assistance and really need it. So this was a major effort, and Tony was did a ton of work here, but a major effort on part of Appia, and kind of shows the necessity for taking involvement with associations, contributing to these efforts, and just being aware of what's going on within the industry.
So who actually proposed this new law? Was it a legislator or somebody from the outside that put it on their desk?
So from what we gathered from our lobbyist and the communications that we had, was it was actually presented by the Insurance Department of West Virginia. They're the ones that put together the bill. From what we know historically, when we have these types of bills moving forward, that it is often a combination of insurance departments that push the bill forward, but it is kind of with a whisper in the ear from some of these insurance organizations for the carriers. And what happened with this one, just like is happening in a number of states at the beginning of this year, is a lot of the legislators that are involved in moving these bills within the states are involved in the national bill that was moving forward either through NCOIL or NAIC, which is the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. They also have a model bill that was moving forward. So they hear about it at these conferences that NAIC runs, that we go to on behalf of Appia to again, educate. But they see this happening at these events, and then they go back to their state and say, why don't we do this? Because we're talking about it in other places. That's why it's one of the biggest messages I would ever want to get out is, just because it's not your state that it's happening right now doesn't mean you shouldn't care, because it really does trickle out to other states that pass these bills.
So let's talk about other states. Since you brought that up, Tony, what other states are active right now with this kind of legislation that the public adjusters and actually the policyholders should also be aware of?
Yeah, so right now, South Carolina is moving forward with a bill, and we are starting our process through Appia to educate down there as well, because they similarly have a 10% fee cap suggestion in there that again would be detrimental to the consumers down in South Carolina. We've contested them in a number of states. I believe South Carolina is the last one though, and we're kind of at the tail end of the legislative season. So we expect this to be the last one of the year to really be pushing forward right now.
You find any states that have passed their legislation and then realized that maybe it should be reversed, and they go back and try to change it?
We are working with one state that has one of the worst public adjuster fee cap laws in the country. I don't want to name names right now, but we are working with one on that exact issue, that we've started to educate them, and they're starting to realize, oh, this is why it's not good for the consumer. And the problem becomes is they don't know the problem because they're not seeing these small claims get adjusted or getting handled because it just never crosses their desk because there is no professional assistance to even tell them, hey, you've got options.
Mhm.
There was a state that we worked with earlier this year that told us if we came back with data from the public adjusters that are actually operating in that state, showing that they've had to turn down, policyholders that really needed their assistance, that we could come back to them and start that, conversation back up. So we're doing that. Yeah.
So are any of these fee caps, or do any states look at it like this, the type or the style of the claim? If it's a $200,000 hurricane claim versus a $10,000 pipe that broke in Philadelphia, right? I mean, do they ever break it out, by the type of the claim? Or is it just blanket, general, 5%, 15%, 25%, 2%?
So states where we see this moving forward are often will separate out cat losses, so catastrophic claims, for a fee cap. So some states that might have no fee cap, generally speaking, they might have a percentage cap on catastrophic losses. And again, conceptually, that sounds okay, and we're generally not against it to some degree, but the problem becomes how you define the loss. So, for example, if somebody has, a car crash into their house, but it happened to be during a hurricane, all of a sudden that is a cat loss, even though the hurricane had nothing to do with it, but it happened during the storm, it gets assigned as a cat loss. And it really needs to be more defined as a result of the storm rather than, just during the storm. But that's how they separate them out. Right now, there's no legislation that differentiates between a $10,000 loss and a $20,000 loss, although that is something that we've explored of if there is going to be something that moves forward with caps, maybe we just talk about it a little differently, depending on if it's a $15,000 roof claim or a $400,000 total loss fire.
Sounds like both of you are very active, not only in your own respective states, but on a national level, and try to sort these issues out and guide them. Do you have anything you'd like to tell anybody, to give you a call, to, ask you questions on how you can help, or how they can just kind of, work their own state?
Yeah, I would say for public adjusters, join an association, whether that's your local association or APIA, the national association. We take pride in being the national home of the public adjusting profession, and contribute. We have a link to our legislative fund on our website. Reach out to us if you're interested in ongoing legislative efforts, whether that's interest in your state or other states around the country. And our contact information is on our website, aapia.org. So be my best advice for any adjuster, whether they're new or seasoned.
And I believe, Cole, you also said that you, or APIA, does work with some other associations, right? More local associations.
We do, yeah. So all of the associations for public adjuster, whether that's the Florida Association, the Carolina Association, there's a bunch of them.
Right.
A lot of these work together on issues and can really help. A lot of the state specific ones, and Tony may be able to speak to that a little bit more, but a lot of these work together. So.
Tony, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, it's really comes down to finding some way to contribute. And I sound probably like an NPR fundraiser, but it doesn't take much, right? You don't have to be contributing $1,000 or $1,500, $2,000. An APIA membership at the national level, what's the total, Cole, for a year?
It's like $450.
Yeah, $450, $500, somewhere in that range if you're a member, but you don't even need to do that. If you contribute $50 to the legislative fund, it helps. If you want to contribute time and assist, in these efforts moving forward, any level of contribution, because what really is the worst thing to this industry would be this adjusters across the country sitting back and just not doing anything, thinking, this isn't going to come to my state, so I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
It's really important to get involved and find a way to contribute to make sure that the consumers and the public adjusters are protected.
And
That's
to
good.
build off that, a lot of people think that, oh, somebody else will take care of it. I'd heard this once when I first got involved with Appia that we are those people. We are the people that are going to step in, and there is nobody else. So kind of embodying that and embracing it, and that is
Good.
making a difference for the industry. So,
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. It was a good interview, a lot of good information. And I'm sure that the people watching this are going to appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you, Brad, for putting it together. Really, it's great to be able to do this, get the information out there. And if anyone does have questions, I gave you my cell phone number before, 609-354-8009. Please feel free to reach out anytime.
Good. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks. You too.
You're welcome. Yep.